There we are.
That's funny. Y'all missed it. Mason was leading our music. You should have been on Mr. Holland's Opus. It was a great show. Yeah. Oh, there it is. There it is. Mr. Holland's Opus. Woohoo! Go, Mason. Go, Mason. This is where Landon gets it from.
Just feeling the music.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma with Sarah and Mason Westbrook. We're really happy to be here with you.
Feels like that light's just got
today.
You know.
I don't care. I think it looks good. We're leaving it alone. We already played with it. We got shadows. All right, we're going to get our lighting issues worked out here eventually. I'm also get Mason more on the screen there. Okay, so I don't know. That looks good. We messed. Well, I think we bumped it. Anyway, all right. Whew, reset. Take two. Welcome. We are really excited. We've got some announcements coming up. Mason and I have talked about this for the last couple of weeks, and we are going to start doing a Sunday School with Sarah and Mason live.
Bum, bum, bum.
Bum, bum, bum. Do you have a time or date, like which Sunday? It'll be one Sunday a month.
So the problem is with my call schedule,
right?
I cannot pick specifically one specific Sunday, but we're going to try. We're going to try and do like every fourth Sunday of the month or something like that. As soon as we know, we'll let you guys know so that you can be a part of that. And as we plan for that, we really would like ideas.
Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, we can come up with a lot of stuff, and if we don't get ideas, we'll come up with something. We have ideas, of course, already. But if you guys have ideas about what you would like to have discussed in kind of a Sunday school forum, we'd love to hear that and love to be able to walk down that path.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the reasons that this was so exciting for both of us is both of our favorite calling was gospel doctrine teacher in the Mormonism. So we're gonna expand that. We'll be talking about spiritual growth. We'll be talking about being good humans.
Right. It'll certainly not be a Mormonism thing.
Will not be a Mormon.
Probably won't approach it even the same way that we do Unpacking Mormonism. It'll be
different.
Let's take some topics of spiritual importance to people and let's kind of dissect them and talk about
spiritual and ethical importance. Oh, I like it. Okay.
Ethics.
Alrighty. So today, what did we end up titling this one? I'm sorry, y'all. I am behind.
Hypocrisy of Mormon Leadership.
The hypocrisy of Mormon leadership.
If that doesn't catch your fancy, then nothing will, right there.
Right. And in a response to the SEC investigation, the SEC's investigation of the church, and the $5 million fine that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, aka Mormon Church, was just levied against them. That's the word I was looking for. And
that's a good word, levied.
Levied. Yeah, nice. I like it, my vocabulary words. Yeah, so our intention today is not to necessarily present all of the facts, although we are going to be doing that. We will be presenting some of the things that we've read on the media. We're going to be talking about some of the things that we have seen. Mason specifically listened to the Mormon Stories episode on this today. And so we're just going to kind of be presenting that more as an introduction. But our goal is to really dig into what you as the listener is feeling about this. Are you angry? Are you bitter? Are you feeling sadness? Or is there pain, betrayal? There's lots of emotions that go into this type of a discovery. And so I think that that's going to be where we really want to focus on that. And Mason is going to be taking the lead on a lot of the stuff tonight. And I say that with the goal in mind that I will talk less than you. All right.
I'm sorry, I need a breath.
Welcome to Unpacking Mormonism. All right, we're a little goofy.
It's funny. So we're really excited about doing another live episode. We reached over 500 people on the first live episode. Yeah. We're very excited about that. Most of our episodes are getting somewhere between 80 and 120. Some have gotten even up into the 300s, I think. But in 1 week, essentially, we reached 500 people with what we had to talk about. And last week, it was stuff that is beneficial for all of us on a daily basis. We're talking about the RAID cycle and processing emotions. And so we're really excited to be here for another live episode, a little faster, I think, than either one of us was intending. But the Mormon Church gave us some stuff to talk about.
Breaking news in Mormonism right now, in Mormonism. Yeah.
So,
well, and I want to say that, Mason, you gave a how many listens per episode kind of a number, and it's been really variable on that, but we've had over 16,000 downloads, like over 16,300 downloads since we started
in September.
So yeah, we're growing really quick, and we're excited to have
not even 6 months.
The listener along. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So Mason, I'm going to go ahead and turn the show over to you, and I'm going to zip my lip. So that way at dinner tonight, when we go get fajitas, because I'm craving steak fajitas and a margarita. So when we go get that tonight after the show, I can say I told you so, and I succeeded. Therefore, I deserve 2.
Hey, Alex,
margaritas.
I don't know if you can do this, but if you had 2 stopwatches, and if you just click one when I start talking and stop it when I stop and start, that might be a little.
Tell you what, the first listener that shoots us an email or reaches out on our Facebook page and gives us
of the show.
Right, or in the comments to me, you tell me what our percentage is at the end. I will send you a hat with Daisy Girl on it and a water mug that has the Unpacking Mormonism logo on it for free. Okay, so challenge to our listeners to determine who talks more tonight. Incentive for me to be really quiet, because when I get those I told you so numbers, I get 2 margaritas. So then 2
tonight. If she actually accomplishes not speaking more than me, it's going to be a much more boring interval. So we'll just see how this goes. I actually thought it was funny because I remarked to you, normally in our episodes, you talk more than I do. This is meant to be educational. We're meant to talk about things, getting to know our brains, our emotions, all those things so that we can process and unpack some of the trauma that we're feeling. In this case, specifically focused on religion in general. Yeah. And because of that, it's only natural that you're going to do more of the talking. And I don't find any issues with that. It was interesting last week on the first live one we did. It was a little more apparent to me just how much more talking you're doing, because you can see my face. So the goal is eventually to have 2 different monitors. We'll be on different monitors. And Alex can just take me off the screen when I'm not talking.
That'll probably be good. So that way, I don't know when you're not listening. All right, keep going, hon.
So if you go back to our episodes, I think it's episode 4. It might be episode 5 of Unpacking Mormonism, where we talked about the abuse scandal in the church. And I remember starting that episode.
Hang on, you're talking about the 7 years
Mormonism.
Of sexual abuse that was not reported.
It was our response to the AP article about the sexual abuse.
Okay.
I think it's either number 4 or number 5. You can find out easily enough. I remember starting that. One of the first things that I said was, I'm angry. And the reason that I bring that up now is because I'm feeling a lot of those same feelings. And we're going to get to the feeling part. If you know me at all, if you've listened to our episodes, or if you know me, I'm not very good at the feeling part. I'm actually pretty good at empathy, particularly when I can recognize that I know that's what's needed. I'm sometimes not very good at recognizing when that's needed. But when I recognize it, I'm actually pretty good at the empathy part. But I'm not very good at recognizing my own feelings and working through them. Some of the material that we've gone through in these podcasts has been helpful for me. I've seen a therapist, and that has certainly been helpful for me as well. But I'm not very good at that. And so what I wanted to do today is, because my mind is generally focused on the facts or the specifics of a situation, I'd like to kind of start there, and then we're going to move into what that means to me and to you, and what it might mean to you as a viewer. Hopefully we'll get some comments from viewers as well, as you can kind of share where you're at. because there's lots of different perspectives to see this from, and we can only share really from ours.
Well, and I think it's really important, Mason, to address this, to the listeners as well. Number one, everything that we're talking about here is for educational purposes only. I probably need to get that little clip from the podcast brought on here.
It was,
but
when he loads it up, it comes up with that.
Oh, cool. Awesome. Great. Go, Alex. Love ya. Okay. So, but one of the things I want to comment here is that, yes, you are a very analytical thinker. You are very fact driven. As a person, you definitely like, this is how I see it. And this is my perceived reality. These are the objective facts. These are the subjective facts. And you tend to communicate best by laying all the facts out on the table and addressing the emotions later. Yeah. And that's not a bad thing. And I want our listeners to know that's not bad. There's nothing, quote unquote, wrong with you if that's how you communicate and see the world. And so one of the benefits that about us understanding that about you, and what we're trying to model here on the show tonight, is this is how Mason communicates. This is how Mason problem solves. We've got to use those personality traits and those characteristics and the way that your brain thinks in the way that it does in order to best communicate. And really, in a relationship for you and I, one of the things that we do is we go back and forth within a conversation. Ideally, we do not do this all the time. We are having an upcoming episode that's going to be titled something along the lines of Trouble on the Home Front, where we can talk about some of those crash and burns. But when we're really successful in our communications with each other, it's because we are identifying what our partner needs in that communication setup and responding to that so that you feel heard, validated, and understood. Yeah. And so I've learned in my marriage to you that if I let you give me the facts, whether I agree with them or not, if I hear your facts and I validate those for you first, then we can get down into what I feel is most important, which is experiences, perception, feeling, emotion, connection. Yeah. And, Brene Brown agrees with me. So.
Well, if Brene Brown says it.
Right. We can't have a show without shouting out Brene Brown.
We're barely 10 minutes in. Yeah. So, all right.
All right. So go ahead.
I do want to say that the facts, quote unquote, that I present here are facts as I see them. I'm not saying that they're necessarily the 100% fact. I think that they are, but I also hate research. So it's not so much that I've spent hours and hours and hours trying to make sure that these are the facts as they are, but I have spent a decent amount of time listening to others who claim to know, and it would appear as if they know what the facts are in this situation.
Well, and I would say that those sources that you're utilizing are also, you have a history with them being factual, and that they generally produce in their show notes the citations so that if there's something that you hear that bothers you, you're willing to chase that down.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. And for you, the viewer, if you hear something and you're like, I'm not sure about that, remember, this is my perspective. And there's lots of stuff out there right now. The world is abuzz right now with this information, which is why we chose to do this show now, because a lot of shows are going to focus on the facts, and we want to be able to focus on the emotion. What is the process? What are we going through right now? Yeah. So that we can get through that stress cycle, so we can process the emotions and be in a healthy place for us.
Absolutely. All right, Mason. So what are the facts all right, as you perceive them?
What are the facts? So if you really want all the facts, go to at least in the way that I think they're presented really well. You can go to Mormon Stories Podcast. It's number 1732. It's called LZS Church Fined $5 million for hiding money with Mark Pugsley.
Well, and I'm going to challenge you real quick. You said for all of the facts. I love Mormon stories. We're not going to give them that much credit for some of the facts in one spot that Mason is talking about. This would be a great episode because there's been several news articles, the investigation itself. Yeah, there's a lot of places you can go.
So let me clarify too. What I mean is that in this case, Mark Pugsley is an attorney who works with fraud, specifically things like Ponzi schemes.
Okay.
So you're taking big corporations who are basically hiding money or not doing what they need to do to protect money. So he has a world of experience in this kind of thing. So for me, it rings true. He also takes the time to go through the SEC report.
That's nice.
The public report that was put out there for all of us to read, anyone can look it up.
Right.
He goes through what that does and kind of highlights some of the things that are important in there.
So you're saying then that Mormon Stories has an expert
Yes.
that came on and did a commentary. You felt that it was well done. And so for our listeners, we would recommend you head on over to Mormon Stories episode, listen to episode number 1732.
But not yet.
Not yet.
Finish this one first.
After us, head over to Mormon Stories.
When you get the chance. It's 2.5 hours long because it's Mormon Stories. They're all long. But it was very good and very interesting.
Awesome.
So, Alex, if you can pull up number 1 on there, let's see what this is. All right. So this is the whole thing there. Nope. You had the right one. I just need the number 1 that's on the scroll there. So the first thing that we see is the SEC investigates Ensign Peak. Now, if you don't know what Ensign Peak is essentially a affiliated organization that the church is kind of being a little bit dodgy about how it fits in with the church. But ultimately, from this SEC report, you're going to see that kind of plays out. So
I thought that the Ensign Peak was like the investment arm of the church. Like it was the business portion.
It is. But
are they supposed to be nonprofit as well, or are they for-profit investment?
So I'm not going to go into that too much. From my understanding is that they fall under the window or the wing of nonprofit because of its involvement with the church.
Right. Okay.
But they're the investment wing, or at least one of the big investment wings of the church. Okay. So number 1, the SEC investigates Ensign Peak. Number 2 is the SEC finds that Ensign Peak is at fault. In other words, they've hidden money, they've hidden profits, they've tried to evade essentially taxes and other penalties or whatever. And I'm no investment guy, I'm no attorney. So if I kind of speak that wrong, try not to fillet me.
Well, and I see a mistake here on your notes with Alex. The SEC should should be in all caps because it's an acronym.
Yes.
There.
So that's
just
the
so that you're
securities and I forgot now. I had it just a little while ago. Securities.
You're doing awesome.
I'm
terrific. Good job, Alex. Alex did
that. Was fast.
That was fast, Alex. You're at so yes, they are the investigative arm.
Yes.
One of the investigative
Securities
arms.
and something commission, and it will come to me here in a little bit. So if somebody out there on the chat knows, put it up there so we can see it. Or Alex will look it up or something.
Exchange.
But anyway, Securities and Exchange. There it is. Securities and Exchange Commission. So they find Ensign Peak to be at fault. All right, number 3. Because I don't want to belabor these too much. And maybe I should just pull them up on my phone too so I can read them here. So the SEC verifies, and this is a big piece for me too, that Ensign Peak does not operate without first presidency approval.
Meaning the Ensign Peak does not make any decisions without the prophet and his 2 counselors' approval.
Yes. Also, the presiding bishopric. Now, I don't know if that can be one or the other sometimes, but you're talking about the senior leadership of the church. They do not operate without that senior leadership.
God's personal mouthpiece, the prophet, who claims to speak for God, has to approve the decisions that are made on how the money is invested and utilized. Is that accurate?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. So now, this is God now. And in Mormondom, that's the idea, is that if the prophet says it, it's coming directly from God.
Right. And of course, we've talked about, and lots of members would argue a little bit of the logistics of that, but essentially, yes. And you could also argue, well, did the first presidency look at all of this and make those decisions? I don't know. Ultimately, they hold personal responsibility for the decisions made.
But I don't know. When I think about our own investing, so our financial advisor, his name is Marcus, really nice guy. When we sat down with him, he explained everything. Right. Why it would grow in the way that it did, how it was beneficial for taxes, how it was beneficial for retirement, how those funds could or couldn't be utilized. And then the other piece of that is our accountant, Debbie, also a great lady. And, the bookkeepers that we've had in the past, they inform me. So when I'm looking at my private practice, Westbrook Counseling Services, or the productions communications company that, Daisy Girl Communications, when I'm talking to that team that handles the money, because this is not my expertise, we have meetings at least annually to talk about what the funds are doing, what the risks are, what the benefits are. And when I go to them, I say, hey, am I able to do this? They'll say, well, yes, you can, but this might be better. Right. Or, hey, that's a little shady. You're not able to do that. That's outside of the law. Well, yeah, you could do that, but then you'd go to jail. Those types of things. Yeah. And I actually have a friend, I just thought about this. My friend, she was the Young Women's president that I served with in San Antonio. And I won't say her name because I don't have that permission. But her job was to investigate tax fraud. I would love to reach out to her. I'm going to have to do that. And we will follow up with you on that. I will reach out to her and say, hey, what are your thoughts? Where are you at with this? I wonder if she was involved in any of that, because that is something that she does as her profession, is that she investigates great big companies and corporations for tax fraud.
Well, and let me clarify, I'm not trying to make excuses for the first presidency or for the leadership of the church. What I do want to put out there is that there is the possibility exists that, like when you said our investment person explained things, well, he didn't necessarily explain all the legal side of things. There's the possibility that maybe they weren't completely informed about the legalities of what was going on, although personally, I find that difficult to believe.
Yeah, I would say not so much, because again, in my personal experience on my personal taxes, my personal retirement accounts, and my business accounts, I've got my financial advisor giving me pieces of that are vital for me to understand how my money is working for me, against me, blah, 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 blah. And then I have my accountant that actually files the taxes, that says, when I say, hey, can I deduct this? No, you can't. That's against the code. Hey, can you send me mileage? Hey, I still need this. I'm missing this. Right. There is communication. And I just have a really difficult time with the idea that a prophet would be like, yeah, you just do it because of it's, this one section. As you're going to say, the arm that got investigated is only a small part. I just can't see the prophet of God saying, yeah, you handle $32 billion however you see fit, and don't just, where do I sign? Like, I just don't see that, especially when we say, 25 years of investigation. So you're talking about how many different men would have been involved in that.
I think we're kind of belaboring the point. I just want to make sure that the remote possibility exists. It's probably not the case. So anyway, that's just to tie in. So the Ensign Peak, as this financial arm, is working, but the SEC report states that they do not act without senior leadership approval, in this case, the first presidency. Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah, makes perfect sense.
All right, so number 4. All right, so the SEC and the church. So now that there's been the investigation, The SEC lawyers, whatever, come together with the church and their lawyers, and they negotiate. And this is the way that Mark explains it. They negotiate the findings and the statement that will be made. In other words, the SEC might come to the church with a prepared statement, but the church and the SEC are going to kind of argue over what actually gets put out there.
You're talking about put out in the public record.
Yes.
So
the report that came out, the 9-page report, is what he's talking about. That 9-page report gets deliberated and argued over, so that essentially both parties have to agree to what then goes public.
Okay.
So the church can't come and say, well, we didn't agree with that. It is the legally binding that they come to an agreement on what's there. Now, maybe that's disingenuous to what actually happened, but that is the way that it goes, right? So and basically the church says, okay, yeah, you found us at fault, but you're not going to print that. It could happen like that. But ultimately what you need to know is that when the report comes out, the church and the SEC have come to agreement or terms on that report.
Okay.
All right. And Numbers 5.
Also, Alex gave you it's Securities Exchange Commission. Yeah. Okay, got it.
Yeah, I saw that. All right, so
Thanks.
the Ensign Peak and the church are fined. In this case, Ensign Peak was fined $4 million and the church was fined $1 million. Why is that important? Because it shows that they're both liable for the fraudulent.
Right.
So it wasn't just the Ensign Peak as the investment arm of the church, as kind of a sort of, I think they called it an auxiliary when they set it up.
You got to talk in your mic because you're in my ear. You're like doing this number.
So they kind of, when they set it up in 96, I think it was 96 or 97, which you can look that up. They set it up and kind of called it an auxiliary to the church. Well, if you've been involved in the church at all, you understand what an auxiliary means to the church. Why that matters is that both entities, both Ensign Peak and the church as an organization, were found to be liable in what happened. And for me, that's a big deal. The SEC isn't just saying, well, you know what, Ensign Peak, they screwed this up. They're saying Ensign Peak and the administration of the Ensign Peak, which is the church, both liable for what happened.
Well, and something that stood out to me when I read the pieces of the public report in, the news articles, and I saw it, I think, in the Salt Lake Tribune, I saw it on the Deseret News, I saw, a couple of these places where the SEC stated that the church knowingly, that the leadership purposefully, that this was done with knowledge. And so what you're telling me then is, because they have to agree for what goes into that report and that both are liable, that I just lost my train of thought, that the church agreed that they knew what they were doing and that it was sketchy.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Actually, there's one thing that I think Mark brings up in this Mormon stories thing, is that this is mostly about, if not completely, I don't remember exactly, mostly about not filing a specific form. I think he called it the 13F form, which doesn't mean anything to me. But this is mostly about not filing that form ever. Well, you're supposed to file it every year. And so the Ensign Peak people came to the First Presidency the very first year after it had been organized, which I think was in 1997, and said, we need to file this form. Well, what this form is basically a form that states what you have earned. It's like an earning statement. And don't quote me on that. That's just the way that I remember him explaining this, is that it's a statement of earning. And why I remember that is because basically Ensign Peak tells the First Presidency, we're supposed to fill out this form. Well, if we fill out this form, everyone's going to know what we're earning.
Right.
And the First Presidency, as they deliberated about that, and they have this on record, their main concern was, if this becomes common knowledge, we're concerned that members will stop paying tithing. That was the number one issue, is that we're concerned that the members will stop paying tithing. This was during Gordon B. Hinckley's era, so it would have been Gordon B. Hinckley, Thomas S. Monson, and Henry B. Eyring. one future prophet, and one person that's been in the first presidency since he started in the first presidency around that time.
Right.
So that's the big deal, is that was in the first year. So every year now comes it for me, and we'll talk about this as we get to kind of the accountability piece, it is deceptive.
Yeah, they're doing things in secret.
Yes.
And we know that when people do things in secret, it's because they're hiding something.
Right. There's only one reason.
And usually if I'm hiding something, it's, I know the church really likes to say, oh, well, it's sacred, not secret, for like temple things and stuff. But it's because there's a fear of discovery with negative consequences somewhere along the lines.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. All right. Number 6. All right. So now the statement comes out. Now, one of the things that Mark says about this statement, and of course it's available, you can download it and look at it yourself, read it, is 9 pages. He says either that's the longest one he's ever read or one of the longest ones. And he said there's a reason for that. The SEC typically doesn't fine companies a huge amount of dollars. Sometimes they do, and he mentions a couple that were recently fined as much as $500 million with a B. So they do fine people a lot, but they don't typically fine them a ton, because the people that really feel that are the investors, or the people that have bought stock. You and me, who have bought, our mutual funds, will feel it, because there'll be fewer dividends that are paid out and blah, blah, blah. So he says that the SEC's statement is oftentimes the most important piece, because it's the one that really talks about what went down. This is kind of the warning to the company. Y'all need to fix your crap. You're doing this wrong. You need to fix it. And he kind of explains that's exactly what's going on with the church. The church got hit by a little tiny fine. With my math, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you take 32 billion as opposed to 5 million, which was the fine, you're talking about 0.001% of that. It's minuscule.
Right. Well, and I think, again, it's important to say, and this is just one piece of the church's, entire portfolio.
Right. That's
that
right up
estimates,
there. Exactly,
right.
Yeah.
The estimates are that the church's assets all together are somewhere between 150 and 200 billion dollars, or 180 is what it says there. But this is a little one. This isn't even a big one. We're not even talking about a quarter of the church's overall wealth at all.
And we're not here to talk about their operating costs and all that stuff, but just that's an incredible amount of money. And in this case, a fine that is pee into the wind kind of a thing. Like it did not hurt the church or Ensign Peak one tiny little bit.
Right.
So anyway, the SEC statement is the big deal. That's the big piece where you can read through and kind of see what's going on. That's where it says that they didn't move without approval from the first presidency. That's where it says all these things that I've been putting out there. Those are in that statement. So now the statement is public. Number 7. Did you have anything else you want to say? Okay.
No, I'm good. I'm earning my second margarita.
All right. So number 7, the church is legally obligated to not release a conflicting statement to the facts in the SEC statement. So this is a big deal as well too.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing already because I already know where this is going. The church is legally obligated to not basically go against that 9-page report. And what do?
So if you think about,
it wasn't our fault.
A lot of us are familiar. We watched, Law and Order TV shows about this kind of stuff. If you cop a plea, basically you make a plea bargain. There's gag restraints in there too. If you plead to involuntary manslaughter,
right, they're called non-disclosure. Like you choose to
take this penalty in lieu of going to court and going through a trial. You choose to take this penalty. We're gonna, it's first-degree murder, but we're gonna plea you down to involuntary manslaughter, so we don't have to go through the trial. You get some sort of non-disclosure. You cannot talk about this,
I
that,
think
or the
you're
other.
using a bad example, because when it comes to like murder trials and stuff, those generally tend to be public record, is my understanding. And I'm not an attorney either, but I would say a better example would be something along the lines of, if you accuse me of doing something and we settle out of court, part of that settlement agreement is you are not allowed to talk about it publicly anymore, which means that the only people you can talk about it with are people who are sworn to secrecy. And so one of the things that I've had happen in my clinic is I will have people who have won suit, actually some against the church, where the church, they settled, and then there's that non-disclosure. I think that's what it's called, but you're not allowed to talk about it. And so then I get clients that come in and they can talk to me about it because I'm bound by law not to talk about it with anybody else unless I've got like a court order or something. And even then, you know, when you're talking with counselors, that HIPAA agreement is there to protect the client. And so I can only report those things if I feel that there's
elocution. Apparently,
elocution is the legal term. Thank you, Michael. I appreciate that. So, but the thing is for me is that when I report, hey, this person is imminently harmful to themselves or to somebody else, or I've been court ordered, I'm only allowed to talk about the details that are pertinent to getting the appropriate things going. So, you know, I've had some of my records or my notes have been court ordered before. Now, this is a funny thing that happens to me, is that lawyers will send me demands of send me the record. And I get to be like, nope, I'm not going to do that because you're not the judge. So I can't, when the attorney asks for it, I can only give those records over if the client has signed. And so, you know, I get a lot of attorneys thinking, oh, maybe she'll send me stuff because they send me this,
they'll bully you into it.
Right. This letter with letterhead. And, you know, and I get that. That's that legal thing of, well, hey, if she discloses, then we have this. And also we can't use a lot of it because it gets tossed. Whereas if a judge says you have to, and the only time I've been court ordered for anything has been a judge that has said, I want to see the notes from, you know, February 1st to February 28th of 2021. Those are the only notes that I'm looking for. And most of the time, I'm able to just write up a prepared statement of these are the things that were discussed that are pertinent to the case, because judges are generally very good at protecting the privacy of my clients. And so these people that have settled out of court, and then they've chosen to basically have a gag order in their ability to talk about, you know, things like what the settlement amount was or what happened, those types of things that all get sealed up. You're not allowed to talk about it. But I hear a lot of those things because of my profession, because I'm also not allowed to talk about it. Right.
So in this case, thank you very much. Because you're right. My example was not a very good
your example was shitty. And I love you
for
it.
That.
That's that condensation. Not condensation. Not condensation.
That's something different.
You're condescending.
So in the interest of getting to what we're talking about tonight, ultimately what matters is that the church and SEC can't agree on the statement. The SEC puts it out there publicly, and then the church says, nah, that wasn't really true. They can't do that. They could face legal repercussions by doing that. And
what did they do?
So if you look at number 8 there, the church releases an official statement that conflicts with the SEC statement and blame shifts.
Right, the sec. So Alex, we got to fix that sec on that one as well. So what was the statement though, Mason, that when you say they released a statement for you, thanks, Alex, what are you referring to?
So I'm going to be honest and say I don't exactly remember.
Okay. I appreciate the honesty.
Because I caught the information, and that's what came to my mind, is that he's saying the church can't do this, and they did this with these couple of things.
Okay.
And of course it's in normal church speak. It's, you know, it's not blatantly out. The SEC, we said we did this, and no, we didn't do this. That's not what's going on. It's more of a, the devious way of kind of getting around.
Right. My understanding was they broke this when they released it, saying we did what we were advised to do, but you did what you were advised to do when and in what way and by whom. And really the way that the church stated it, the Mormon church stated that and was it a press release or something? I don't remember
I think so.
Where it came out. I think it was a press release, but where they came out and they basically said, we didn't know we were committing fraud.
Right.
We were doing what we were advised to do by the lawyers, the financial advisors. Right. Later, we did what the accountants told us to do. But in the SEC, in those 9 pages, the SEC said, no, the church knowingly, the leadership of the church knowingly, committed tax fraud. Right.
Basically. So you have an organization, SEC, that their whole business is investigating this kind of fraudulent thing. And they come out and they say the church leadership knowingly did this. They find the church as an entity because of it. This has been going on. So the investigation, I think, takes place from 97 to 2019 So over 20 years. No, the investigative time period. Of 19, I think it's 97 to 2019. So over 20 years, they investigated what went on. During that time, they never filed this one form, the 13F.
Right, and if you are working for a corporation worth billions of dollars, you know that you need to file the form.
Right. It seems completely incomprehensible that they didn't know, that they were ignorant of this, and then. And again, in this blaming way, it's almost like, and this is kind of the disingenuous part that we want to get to when we're talking about how I'm feeling about this. It's almost like they're putting this statement out there for blind church members who will not investigate, who will not read the SEC report. They're only reliant on what the church tells me happened. The church is going to come out and say, we only did what we were told. We were just following the advice that we had.
We're the innocent victims. And I agree with you, Mason, because, that's that beginning of the hypocrisy of the leadership that we're going to talk about here as we come up. And that is that there's different standards for the organization and the leadership than there is for the members. They're gaslighting the members. They are expecting many people to just utilize that persecution complex and say, things like, well, the government is picking on the church. This is unfair. This isn't, the church and the prophet's supposed to tell the truth. And so, obviously the government's just out. This is Satan. This is the sign of the times. We're going to spiritually bypass the facts to get where we're going. And that's that hypocrisy, that those different standards, for a member of the church, we have certain rules that we're supposed to follow. And one of the things Mason and I talked about in our planning meeting today at the house was, I kind of feel like watching this whole thing unfold, to me, feels like watching my little kids when they're making up a game. And usually the older child who's making up the game for the little kids to play with changes the rules mid-game so that they always come out on top. And the little kids are still a little too, cognitively underdeveloped to recognize that they're, being taken advantage of. And so then the older kid wins and the little kids are like, that was the best game ever. And usually what ends up happening is, after an hour, after 5 minutes or so, one of the little kids will come in. I can't win. I never get. And then you and I are like having to come in and be like, all right, big kid, your game, you have to set the rules, that informed consent. But it really feels like the leadership capitalizes on its members' ignorance.
Yes.
And you know,
or
and they
just
even
blind faith, blind following.
Right. And it you know, this just rings so true in the whole, you know, learning is great, learn all these things, but beware of the educated, for they think they are wise. And really what I see is, hey, be cautious of people who actually investigate, because they know how these things work. You know, if I go to my friend in San Antonio and say, hey, what are your thoughts on this? And am I able to share your thoughts on the show? And, you know, if I'll let you know, hey, I reached out, she contacted her, she said no, blah, 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 you know, whatever. I don't know what those are, but that individual is probably looking at everything very different than you or I. Absolutely, and we are looking at this very different than our respective parents. Yeah. Because I can see both of our parents saying, oh, well, you know, the fine was little, you know, so no big deal. It was just a slap. The government, like, I can definitely see your family, the government's out to get the church. Yeah. You know, I see these, but the church doesn't come out and they're not accountable. And I find that very hypocritical, because if I'm sitting in a Temple Recommend interview, they are going to ask me very specific questions about my honesty and my dealings. And I know on custody cases, they will ask non-custodial parents and custodial parents, you know, are you paying your child support? And so the fact that the church as a great big organization is allowed to be dishonest and deceitful and defraud the government, but I'm not as a member. Right. Right. What? So let me talk about that one a little bit here. So, I'll let you take over. You kind of got into the Temple Recommend thing. Let me step down from my pedestal. Yeah, you do that. Okay, go ahead. Oh yeah, you're shorter. It's weird. Okay. I am. I actually look taller than you. Shut up, you brat. I look squirrel.
You and your pedestal. There it is.
Hey, there's the squirrel. Love it, Alex. No. So because so we can both fit into the screen. Mason's chair, like, you should see his knees. He's like this under here because I'm so short. Okay, yes, I got shorter as I stepped down.
Coming right back on. Okay, you brought up, and you didn't say this, but you brought up the Temple Recommend questions. Right. So there's a couple things here I just want to throw out there. For instance, in 2 Nephi chapter 9, verse 34, it says, "Woe unto the liar, for he shall be thrust down to hell." Yeah. There's that.
Hang on. Not gently shoved or lightly pushed.
Yes, I know you like that part.
Thrust. Hey, that was a big, and so I grew up in Snowflake, Arizona, and the whole taking this scripture and saying not lightly shoved, not gently pushed, it had to have come from one of our seminary teachers. It had to have, yes. It had to have. So. I mean, for all of us as youth to joke around about that scripture in that way tells me it came from seminary, but that's a big deal, that you will be thrust to hell. So by the church's own doctrine, dogma, scripture, whatever, your prophet of God is now going to get thrust to hell. But then that doesn't work because he speaks for God. So then we ask the question, and I'm sure Mormonism Live is going to be doing a breakdown of this in the coming weeks. And, you know, so who is this? Is this God defrauding the United States government? Even though the article of faith says,
we believe in being subject to kings, presidents, rulers, magistrates, and in obeying, honoring, and sustaining the law, except when it doesn't suit our interests.
Except when it cramps our style.
Right. And I'm not going to say that there haven't been times that the Mormon church, and certainly other churches as well, haven't been persecuted by the government. It's historical. Right. You can see that that's the case. And so there's not without precedent here.
Two varying degrees. Yes. Because a lot of the Mormon history, yes, there was some persecution from the government, but also Joseph Smith was doing some really shady shit.
Yes. And then there's the whole polygamy thing. Yeah. Polygamy basically almost destroyed the church. And it wasn't polygamy so much as all the shady stuff that was going on around polygamy.
Shady shit.
So, and we're not going to get into that now, but there's that history. We said our intention was to demonstrate a consistency or pattern of toxicity, which we have tried to do on a lot of things. And here, when we come to the hypocrisy, that's kind of where we're at.
Well, and I want to explain why. You know, one of the things that's really common in my field is we say, what is the greatest predictor of future behavior? Well, it's past behavior. And so what we do in my field is we, at least the way that I practice is let's understand the neurobiology behind these behavioral patterns. Let's take what you've always done, and let's use those as data points so that we can kind of identify where the breakdown is, understand the neurobiology, and then begin to shift into new patterns of behavior. Right. Because if we don't understand what we've been doing, we are oftentimes powerless or limited in the change that we can have an impact on. But on the flip side, if I'm talking to somebody, in couples therapy, or
you're losing your second margarita, by the way.
My boss. No, I'm not. You've been talking a lot.
It's a ratio, sweetheart.
No. You 1 second more than me, I get my second margarita. La, 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 la. I need one of those squirrel clips of like a margarita glass with sugar around the rim. So Alex, I go for strawberry margaritas.
Alex,
but or blackberry margaritas.
Before she gets started again, if any of those comments are comments that we need to address right now, go ahead and throw them up on the screen.
Yeah, this would be a great time for those comments or questions.
We'll move into other stuff, but we want to be able to see those things.
Right, but so when I'm working with...
Welcome back, Faye.
Hey,
it's
Faye!
Good to see you again.
Yay! So when I'm working with clients, one of the things that I do is I help them identify where there have been consistent patterns with no change from somebody else. So like for myself with my father, there was a consistent pattern of abuse, a pattern of denial and shifting the blame. And after trying to get that behavior to change, it didn't. And so then what ends up happening for me is I took those data points to decide how I would navigate myself. So that's why our goal here at Unpacking Mormonism is to really start to dig into these patterns and then to dig into what are the indicators that they are trying to course correct. And I think that really feeds into that accountability.
Yeah.
So Faye, go ahead, Mason.
I got this. So first off, I like to say recognition is the first step to recovery, and that includes being recognized. So in this case, but I love this, Faye. If I could make this in a way that is a little more realistic to most of us, if I went and stole $1,000 from someone and the penalty was $1, I'm not likely to stop that behavior. Right. I gained $999 from that operation with a little slap on the hand. Here's your dollar, man. Here, let me give it back to you from what you took from me, right? Or what I took from you. That is 0.001% of $1,000 is $1. I stole $1,000 from you, and I give you $1 back. We're square. That is what that is.
I could buy a king size Snickers bar with that.
Yeah, and maybe not even anymore. Not with inflation the way that it is, right?
Okay, regular size.
But that's
Snickers
what that
bar.
is. Yeah. All right, Tanya. This is yet another reason churches should be treated exactly the same as nonprofits. They need to pay taxes on profits.
I agree with that. And Tanya, one of the things that's really interesting about that is that on my personal Facebook page, my aunt, who I'm not sure where she's at in her faith journey. I feel like she's a very nuanced member. And one of the things that my aunt said is, hey, LDS Church, the way that you're functioning, you actually owe the investors, the people who paid in, dividends off of what you're earning, because that's the way that this is supposed to legally work. And I know hundreds of Mormons that have left the church. I mean, if you listen to my episode that our Thanksgiving special of why Sarah left the church, the way the money was handled was the one that made me the most angry. And then the way the LGBTQ population was managed, or those people were, I hate that word, how they were managed. That sounds terrible.
Or those people, not really right. What that's not what for.
Yeah, sorry, I'm not being careful with my words here. I apologize. But the way that the 2015 policy came in, that's what broke me. Like it literally broke my soul in a way that was then the eventual downfall of my membership in the church, because I cannot stay a part of an organization
that treats people
people this way.
Yeah.
And, because Faye's comment said, I think 18 billion, which was a typo. It's 32 billion on that SEC, the current investigation is $32
just
billion
on the Ensign Peak Park.
on the Ensign Peak Park with that $5 million fine. But again, the church is estimated at 150 to 180 billion dollars. So at that point, we're not even getting are we getting pennies on the dollars here?
Yeah, well, and I like that comment, Michael. I kind of stated that earlier on too, is that this attorney that was talking on Mormon Stories states that the SEC generally doesn't levy huge fines because it is the investors, it is the little people, the part of the corporation that really suffer from that. And I agree with that. It's a very good point to point out there. And I'm not talking about how the fine should have been more. It's just kind of recognizing that if you put it into perspective, again, $1,000 versus $1, you get kind of the idea of the fact that that fine is unlikely to change behavior. Now, what happened is out in the open now. It's going to change, but... Well,
something's going to change, but the big question is what?
They're going to file those 13
and how ethical is it going to be?
Yes.
But I need you to actually break down Michael's comment for me, because that was not my area of expertise. So can you rephrase what Michael said? Yeah.
So let me just read it. You guys for those that are hearing it. So Michael says,
I'm actually going to slide over real quick and open our door because y'all, it is roasting in here. So give me just a sec.
All right. So Michael says the philosophy of the fining protocol here is that the brunt of a larger fine would be borne by the investors, not the wrongdoer. Who are the investors here? Since the money was largely derived from tithes, it would be the membership, not the wrongdoers themselves. That's the essential philosophy. In other words,
hang on, let me paraphrase so you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. I know, but for my learning style, come on, I'm the boss here, right? No, so
amen, hallelujah.
So correct me if I'm wrong. What Michael is saying is the SEC standard is we don't levy huge fines to protect the little guy, the investor. But in this case, because the money invested was a charitable contribution and there are no little guy investors in this case, we're actually ending up the small fine isn't punishing the person who needs to be. Is that what it's saying?
I don't think so. I don't think that's what he means. I think that he's trying to explain the philosophy behind the fines. In this case, if you say, for instance, you find the church $1 billion. Okay, so you've got a $32 million arm here. We're going to fine you $1 billion. All that is really going to do is take away from the tithing funds of the members. The members are the only ones that get hurt. Does Russell and Nelson get hurt by that?
No.
He's not even going to feel it. He's not even going to notice. Henry B. Eyring, the presiding bishop, none of the leadership of the church is going to get hurt by that.
Right.
Aside from the fact that maybe there'll be far fewer funds that come in, but they personally won't get hurt by that. The people that are going to get hurt that's going to be the moment that the church decides, like a few years ago, no more janitors in the church.
Right. That was
no more janitors. You know what? We need the membership to do the cleaning of the building because they need to take ownership of the buildings. They need to be more grateful that the buildings are there. They need to be more involved. And so, I'm not saying that is what happened, but that kind of thing, like President Nelson is still going to get his dividends. He's still going to get his pay. He's still going to be the leader of the church. Nobody's going to kick him out. But I'm going to have to go to the church a little more often to serve a little more because now we're low on funds.
Right.
Or if I go in there looking for welfare because my family's not doing so well, maybe the rules will be a little more stringent than they ever were. And I might not get what my family needs because they got levied a $1 billion fine. I think that's what's going on there.
Well, and that's so, that example, Mason, that you gave is so personal for us because I know that when we were in, Killeen in North Carolina, not so much in San Antonio because we were drowning and both of us were finishing up our graduate degrees, but in North Carolina and in Killeen, we were one of those families that showed up for pretty much everything. Yeah. And so we were burned the heck out. So that was really difficult.
Yeah. So in this case, it's the investor the member of the church that really suffers from that loss.
Alrighty. So Alex, are there any more comments?
Yeah, he's got one more.
Oh, hi Sheila. We love you. So Sheila tells me all the time. So Mason's phone is on today, y'all, because he's on call for the hospital while we're doing
backup
this.
Call,
backup call.
So,
backup call. So he's got to keep the phone on. But every time, so Sheila, we knew each other in Colleen. Love Sheila. Every time she would come into church with us, she told me that I was her favorite. So she's my favorite because she likes me the best.
All right. So Sheila says, and then after this comment, we're going to move on to the temple recommend questions, because I really want to get into the accountability and just what I'm feeling. All right. So Sheila says, I have a group chat with my TBMs. That's True Believing Mormons, for those of you that aren't aware.
Or
TBM friends.
Mormon, yep.
And mentioned the $5 million fine. I even copy paste the news item and asked about their thoughts. One said, I will leave that to the church. I love the church and the Savior. One said, when the church commits a mistake, it will correct it immediately. They're just clueless about what's happening. And one even comments, whatever is happening will never affect the truthfulness of the gospel. I even told them the investigation time is from 1999 to 2019.
So Sheila, what you're describing is like spiritual bypassing.
Yes.
As you're going. And one of the things that I really like that RFM has really brought to the awareness of the ex-Mormon community is that you can gaslight yourself. So gaslighting is not just a habit of the narcissistic personality disorder person. Right. And that you can be gaslit by a perpetrator, but you can also do it to yourself. And so basically what's going on is I'm ignoring that, that's that automatic belief of, Nelson's a prophet of God. We've been promised over and over for years and years and years that the prophet of God will never lead us astray. They would never purposefully do anything illegal.
That's doctrine. That is in the scriptures.
Are doctrines of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. And yet they won't look at it, because again, remember, when you're looking at things in Mormonism that are not published by the church, you're taught from the time you're itty bitty that that's anti, and you need to stay away from that. That is what, for a lot of people, and myself included, would say, hey, the Mormon church is culty. And that it is a cult is the fact that they control the information of the members. And by doing so, they get that, mind control. And we're not talking about Hollywood's version of mind control. You're not
getting hypnotized. Yes.
Right. But in hypnotizing, there's therapeutic applications and non-therapeutic applications for that as well.
That blindly, like I can't think for myself at all, hypnotized kind of a thing. That's not what's going on.
Zombie brain.
There you go. Zombie brain.
Yeah,
that's even better. There's no zombie brain going on here.
Right.
There's just a lack of thought. There's a lack of account of what really
because it's called thought stopping. From the time you're little, you're taught, oh, that was the Salt Lake Tribune. The Salt Lake Tribune is out to get the Mormon church. We don't read the Salt Lake Tribune because they don't report accurately. Right. So you're cutting down the reporter rather than looking at the information.
Right.
Remember,
and investigating it.
Right. I don't know which point it was, Mason, that you brought up, but the church had to agree and sign off on what was in that 9-page report, according to Mark Pugsley. Right. Who I did not listen to that episode yet. I took a nap.
But if you didn't know that, if you didn't have somebody explain, I didn't know that until today. If you didn't have somebody explain that to you, you would not know. You would think, if you come from this place, take some of my family members. You come from this place where the government is out to get us, and the church can never do wrong, essentially.
So remember that the gaslighting is when you make an individual or yourself question objective reality.
Yeah.
You can also, there's also a component of questioning subjective reality. But what we're talking about are things like in that movie Gaslit or Gaslight, they were purposefully making the lights flicker. That's where the term gaslighting came from. They purposefully made the lights flicker. So the perpetrator said, the lights didn't flicker, but objective fact said that they did. So in this
you
case,
question yourself. And if you question yourself on the lights, what else are you going to question yourself on?
So in this case, we have the church signs a document that says, I agree with what's in this 9-page report. The leadership knew that we were supposed to file this form and we didn't for over 20 years. That is illegal. We knew about that. Oh, hey, and by the way, we're blaming the accountants. They're doing that role reversal, that blame shifting, rather than coming up and being accountable and saying, you know what? Yes, we did this. We didn't think it would matter. You know, whatever. Give your
however
excuses,
you approach it,
but
we own it.
Did not file that form. We knew we were legally obligated to do so, and we chose not to.
Yeah,
that's accountability.
Yeah.
The church has not, and I would predict will not say that.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mason.
This is all great. And thank you so much for the comments. It really, one of the reasons that we're excited about doing Sunday school with Mason and Sarah is because we can take the comments. Like, one of the reasons I love teaching was because there's comments and you can respond and you can think on the fly and you can take time to process and stuff. So that's terrific.
So Mason,
you just told me to get started and now.
Oh, did you have more?
Yeah, there's a little bit more.
Okay.
So there's a couple other things that I talked about. 2 Nephi 9. We talked about the article of faith, number 12. Then you brought up the temple recommend interview questions, and I just want to address those real quick. If you think about the temple recommend questions, whether you've had them before or not, one is, are you honest with your dealings with your fellow man?
Are you talking really fast to get all the information in, or because you're excited? Go ahead. Slow down how fast you're talking.
One is, are you completely honest in your dealings with your fellow man? That is one of the questions. Okay. Second, there was another question that came up that was, are you a full tithe payer? Ooh. So you have to pay a full 10%, or at least state that, because you don't have to, but you have to state that you're a full tithe payer, which means you're paying 10% of your income. And that is part of that as well. Okay. And then the third one that is maybe not as familiar to people is that they will ask you if you have any obligations to a former spouse or children. In its essence, do you have a court-ordered alimony or child support? And are you up to date with those things?
Right. Do you have a legal obligation to respond in a specific way financially
to a former spouse or child?
And are you doing so?
And are you doing those things? Okay, so they get into your life there too. Okay, so there's those three, and maybe there's more, but that's what came to mind. I've done a lot of those temple recommend interviews and been through a lot. But those are the three that came to mind where the church is specifically asking me as a member if I am being honest in those things. And so just kind of coming back to that. In order to get into the temple.
Enter the temple, which is essential,
right,
according to Mormonism, in order to make it to the Mormon heaven.
Right.
If you don't go through the temple for yourself, and if you don't attend regularly, your eternal salvation is at risk.
Right. Now, in theory, you only have to go to the temple once, and then you just kind of live those standards. But yes, it is certainly taught and expected that you'll go to the temple often. Did I just give you some good loud stuff?
When you're not wearing your headphones, you bump things and have no idea you're bumping.
I don't care.
It's annoying as heck.
All right, and then the very last thing that I want to point out is I read a book called Extreme Ownership that really does a good job of talking about leadership. Now, one of the things that I remember reading from this, and I did not go back and look at it today. Mm-hmm. I'm almost positive it came from this book, but maybe I'm wrong.
If he's wrong, still a great book.
Somebody tell me if I'm wrong, but it was, still a great book. But one of the things that this guy talks about, and he was a captain in the Navy SEALs during the very initial parts of Operation Iraqi Freedom, which was 2002 when we went in and this time invaded Iraq. And he talks about one of the signs of a very great leader is that they own all the mistakes and they spread all of the accomplishments out with everybody else. Essentially, they'll be like, you know what? We did a great job. Yeah. Really, that was on you, Anna, James, Kristen. Good job. You guys did great. Or when things don't come back right, they'll say, oh man, you know what? We really screwed that up. Guys, that's on me. we're going to work through this. We're going to take care of that. So his impression of this great leader, which he saw in of course, this isn't combat, but now he teaches corporations all the time. Just a terrific book. But he says, I own the mistakes. You guys own the victories. And what I see from the church is exactly the opposite. And I really, really struggle with that. So ask me your question.
Well, I want to piggyback off of that, actually, because in Brene Brown's curriculum that she brings into big corporations and leadership is you have to respond to the emotion and the vulnerability of the people that you are serving, like the people that are working for you. You've got to be able to respond to that in order to facilitate healthy communication patterns and good teamwork and connectivity. And that when you do that, your productivity increases. And I just don't see that. So
I have a comment on that too, real quick.
Okay, go. And then I'll ask the therapeutic question. I'll take the role of.
What came to mind for me is this idea that, and I've mentioned this so many times, but it just grates me. In a corporation, and I think Brene Brown talks about this too, is that if you don't create an environment where anyone in your organization can be critical of what's going on. Now, I'm not talking like negatively, like just bagging on the corporation.
Don't be an asshole.
I'm talking about recognizing that there's a process that isn't working and we need to talk about it. If you create an environment where people are not safe to bring these things up, you've created an environment where those things do not get corrected. And in the church, this environment has been created that we cannot talk about it.
Right, we're not allowed to criticize.
You can't go to your bishop and say, Bishop, holy crap, I'm struggling. The church is wasting our money. The church just got fined for illegally using our tithing funds every 6 months. Well, every year in General Conference, what do they say? Audit says all the tithing funds have been used exactly the way they're supposed to be and in line with Doctrine and Covenants, blah, blah, blah. Bull crap.
You said crap, I said we've been married.
That was good timing.
We've been married a long time, y'all.
That's the problem with the accountability, and that's what we're moving into here. And that is why I'm pissed.
Well, and that's actually
because they expect the accountability from me.
You need to get off that soapbox, dude. Step down, get short.
Hold on. I'm already too
low.
I'm already as low as I'll go.
No, I love the emotion, but I want to pose to our listeners. Now is the time to share with us, how are you feeling? How are you doing with this information? Because, a lot of us, depending on where we're at in our journey, are going to have different emotions, depending on where we are in our own environments. And so, Mason, you're pissed. So I'm
pissed now. There's more to that. But you
asked
your question.
That's a really intense way to express. So this is me stepping into kind of that therapeutic mode. Okay, I am not. We actually had some feedback that we're going to dissect.
So I don't need to go lower in my chair. I need to lean it back. So I'm like on a couch.
No, we don't do Freud. No.
Tell me how you feel about that.
No. So what I hear you saying, though, is that this being pissed is a really intense form of anger. What do you think is going on underneath? Like, where is that coming from?
I think it's mostly coming from, and let me kind of dig down into that a little bit too. I'm pissed. I'm hurting a little bit, and there is in the back of my mind trying to creep in. There's an intense disappointment because I don't know where to go with this.
So I'm going to challenge you because you said I'm pissed, and then you said I'm a little bit disappointed. I'm going to ask you, is that accurate? Are you really only a little bit disappointed with this?
I am at the moment. And the reason is because there's not much room for more than just being pissed right now. I imagine that as I process this and go through this, because really this came out last week. We're kind of processing this with you guys. I'm certainly processing this with you guys, and we want to be able to talk about it because sometimes watching somebody process what's going on can be really helpful. So I get to be the guinea pig. You guys get to watch me kind of process. So
you're a cute little guinea pig.
So when I say that
almost a naked guinea pig, right? Just kidding.
We're going to pause this for just one second.
Sorry.
How rude. I can't believe you would say something like that. It hurts my feelings. Now I'm not pissed anymore. Now I'm just hurting. There's not a lot of room beyond the anger. Now, and that's typical for me. When something makes me upset, there's a lot of anger. And then as I process and kind of deal with it, I expect that there will be some incredible, intense disappointment, because I now have to figure out, is this something I can deal with? Is this something I can compartmentalize in my life? Is this something where I have to kind of set it aside? And we talk about the shelf. Do I have to set it aside so that I can stay where I think I want to be right now? Or is this going to be one of those things that finally pushes me in the opposite direction, where I can't live with this anymore? I can't be a party to this anymore. Is this just one more thing? Is this the straw? Is this the boulder that breaks the camel's back?
Which has to be terrifying for you, because if this is the straw that breaks the camel's back, the other side is expressing these things to your family, like your community changes, your family dynamics will change even more, friendships change. There's a lot for you that is really weighing on, what do I do with this information, and what can I take? I also want to make sure that, our listener knows that anger is a secondary emotion. It almost always is covering up some other deeper emotion that is more vulnerable. And so it's not surprising at all to me, Mason, that you're feeling you're smiling. It's not surprising at all to me that anger is that first response. It's actually one of the first responses oftentimes in the grief cycle. You get like a cancer diagnosis, or you get a really awful
angry at the world, angry at God,
phone call, and you're like anger and intense anger, and that level of pissed is normal. It's appropriate. It's healthy. And I think that one of the things, one of our earliest podcasts, we talked about how the church teaches that anger is, or contention is of the devil, and that takes the spirit away from you. And I'm here to say, no. Let's remind you, anger is there to protect you, to cover up the vulnerability of, I trusted this organization with my money, and look what they're doing with it. Tanya, I love that. You're also using in Tanya's statement, I'm feeling outrage on behalf of the people fleeced by the church. Yeah, that outrage. Again, we're talking about really intense words to describe anger. And I think a lot of people are angry. And Tanya, I love this because, you're kind of in the same place I am, where it's like, okay, I'm going to support those members, those people that I care about, where Mormonism is still working for them. And then I see that this is what the Mormon church does to the people that I love. And I'm furious, like that mama bear protective of, don't trust them. Look what they're doing. They're hurting you. With individuals who are like, this is the best thing ever for me. And I want to be like, there are more flavors of ice cream than just vanilla.
Yeah. Well, and you know what? One of the things that I think about is, money's not all that important to me. I mean, we need it to live. We need it to get by.
Bullshit.
Let me finish.
Mason stresses out about money. Go ahead, Mace.
Well, and I'm not talking about my own personal finances. I mean, like, I don't have any great desire to be a millionaire. Okay. Like if we were to get to that point, that would be great, but it would really be about just the comfort of not having to worry about finances.
Right. It's what the money represents.
Right. It's not the million or billion or whatever it is. It would be just about, you know what? I would love to be able to pay all my bills and not even write them down on my checkbook register. Right. That would be great. So it's not about the money. And really, when it comes down to the church and in this situation, it's not the money that bothers me. One of the things that I failed to mention that was brought up in Mormon stories is that on that SEC report, it also states that the funds that went to Ensign Peak were from excess tithing funds. It's right there in black and white.
Right.
That is how they got this money.
Our tithing funded this.
Well, and essentially, if you
well, and I think that's important because the church also has some for-profit things, like the City Creek Mall is obviously a for-profit something. Like if you're shopping in a mall, that's for profit.
Right.
And so a lot of times I think members of the church, and I've heard this over and over, will say things like, well, those investment funds are what they've earned off of their for-profit things, the things that they've invested in with those monies. And the answer is no. The church has admitted we funded this with excess tithing. So anything that we did not use for our operating costs. And that really bothers me. I remember when I was leaving, I felt very confused with the way the church was handling the money, because, you know, in the Bible, and we're going to follow Jesus, it's to be very generous, it's harder to get into heaven when you're rich because that influences your generosity. And so for me, I was giving tithing with the expectation that those monies were going to go and help people, that they had farther reach than I did to help those in need. And that's where I wanted that money to go. And it's really uncomfortable. It's really uncomfortable and disconcerting that they've used it to get very, very wealthy.
Without disclosing that either. That's a big
piece. And that they hit it.
Like, if the church comes up in general conference and says, you know what, you guys, you're doing awesome. You're paying so much tithing. We've been so blessed by God, because that's what they would say, right?
Right.
That we have more tithing than we need to run the church. What we'd really like to do is invest that timing. Or we'd like to invest extra
it and save it.
And prepare for a rainy day, or be able to give more down the road, which they're not doing. But if they had been open about it, that would make a big difference there.
Right. So are there any other comments that we've got in the thing? Because Mason, one of the things that you and I had talked about was that you wanted to talk about accountability, and we really didn't get into that. And I don't think we have time to do that tonight.
I have one quick example for it.
All right. So let's address this. So Alex, you put that back on. So we've got, I wouldn't be a millionaire or billionaire for long after I pulled a Mackenzie Scott, only faster. Go ahead, Mason.
All right. So Alex, it's the Gospel Library one. This is an example of the not accountability. So the church is making a big deal out of the Gospel Topics essays, where they discuss some of the ickiness of polygamy, the ickiness of blacks in the priesthood, the ickiness of how women have been treated. Mm-hmm. They discuss some of these things. This is something, it's just a little small thing, but I think it's part of that demonstrating the toxic pattern. So if you had the Gospel Library app, this is one of the apps that the church puts out. So this is the homepage of the library. If you look to the right and down to it says Gospel Topics. Well, the next one goes into Gospel Topics. This is what comes up, the first thing. Well, you'll see right there, Abraham, Book of Abraham. Well, there's lots of ickiness that goes along with the Book of Abraham, lots of struggle, and there's so many scholars that have almost completely torn the book apart as being not what it says that it is. Okay, here it is. So now we're in the Gospel Topics. That's okay, cool. Book of Abraham. Let's go take a look at it. Well, let's go to the next one. This is what you get if you get Abraham Book of. What does it do? It sends you to a different place in the Gospel Topic essays. What really pisses me off is that they put it in here almost like, hey, this is full disclosure. If you want to read about the Book of Abraham, this is what we've got. Yeah, there's some messed up stuff. There it is. But when you get to the place that you think you're going to talk about it, what does it do? It reroutes you somewhere else. And it's just a click of the button, but it's just disingenuous. It's just deceitful. It's like, we put them up there, and you talked about this too, that when the Gospel Topic essays went in, there was no fanfare.
There was no announcement.
There was no announcement. There was like, you know what? Hey, we recognize people are struggling with some really icky things about these things. We put up some Gospel Topic essays. Please go search them, study them, learn about these topics so that you can kind of figure out how to compartmentalize and keep your faith. There was none of that crap. Nobody talks about them except the people who are in this position. Right. You and I, the people that are struggling with whether or not we should stay in the church. We're the ones looking. There's no fanfare. There's nothing.
There's actually, I'm gonna build on that. I didn't realize that you had added that in. Again, you continue to do planning, and I took a nap. Did I not take a nap? I took a nap.
You did.
2 hours.
We have just a couple more minutes.
2 margaritas.
So we're gonna finish this out. But
one of the things that was really interesting to me was that my mom, when they started teaching Book of Abraham, and I was first leaving the church, I was like, "Hey, Mom, these are some of the things." And I was like, "No, Sarah, that's not true." I was like, "No, it's on the church's website." And my mom, like you said, "Oh, well, it must have been hacked." And I was like, "No, it's been there since I think 2013. So no, it's there." And then my mom went in and read it. And even coming from the church, her brain was, I don't have to understand it to still know that this is true, this is good, this is whatever. And so, yeah.
It's very non-apologetic. They call it apologetics. It's very non-apologetic.
That's what apologetics are, aren't they?
Yeah.
They're excuses.
Yeah.
So we're really grateful that you came today. We are going to have to really dig in, Mason, I think, in another episode about that, why the lack of accountability is so difficult for you. We need to do that as a follow-up episode because you did not get to it today.
We thought we would get to it well in here. Yeah, see.
You talk too much.
Is that what it was? I feel like it was because I kept getting interrupted.
All righty. So thank you so much.
I got it. So Alex is going to leave up the methods that you can donate. We've not done this before. All of our podcasts have been free. We haven't asked for donations or anything like that. We have done some ads, but if we're going to go on to, if we're going to try and break into the YouTube market, it's going to take some of that. We can't really throw ads into the YouTube videos. So if you felt like this was helpful to you, if you feel like what we've done has been helpful to you, we'd love for you to go ahead and support us. It all goes to Daisy Girl Communications, which is all about this. Yes. It doesn't support any other organizations. It's about this podcast and some of the other podcasts that we're looking at doing. But we would love to have that support if you felt like this was beneficial to you.
Absolutely. So just to reiterate that all of the funds will be used to pay our production team or buy updated equipment.
It's right
at this
down
point,
there
that
scrolling
is
too, yeah.
Where we will be. We have a passion to make sure that our production team is paid well. Alex.
Right now, Alex is about the only one getting paid.
No, that's not true.
Alex and Michael's
getting paid as well.
I'm not getting anything from it.
Right. And so we want to make sure that we are able to maintain that and support those families. As we grow, we will be, number one, very transparent with where our money goes. That's very important to us, and accountable. And any excess funds that come in above livable wage salaries, which will be reported.
I should invest in Ensign Peak.
No,
they're doing really good.
No. But anyway, when we do have those excess funds, we will put up polls so that those who have donated to our cause have a say in where that money goes to. I've got lots and lots of charities that I support in different ways. And we are always open to hear from you. So again, just in closing, please give us a shout out. Go to our Facebook page, talk about what you liked or didn't like.
Share this crap.
Share this shit. It sounds a lot better when you say it that way. But also I also want to make sure, did you make me lose my train of thought? I blame you. It's your fault. But I also want to remind you to send us your ideas for our upcoming live events, Sunday School with Sarah and Mason. Again, we're not trying to be super religious, not at all. We want to do kind of a secular Sunday gathering where we can support you in improving as human beings. Thanks so much, everybody. We love you. See you next time.